Welcome to the History Veteran UK. Pretty much does what it says on the tin. So, this morning I'm on the shelved beach at Deal, and I will just let you have a look at the topography here. So, beach in one direction, you might just be able to make out the cliffs at Kingsdown. Very calm sea today, and the wind's in the right direction. Perfect for those little rubber dinghies coming across. A bit of shipping out there. Bit more of the beach. So it's beach as far as you can see, and Deal Pier in the distance. Just over there beyond the trees is the top of Walmer Castle. So it gives you an idea of where I am if you ever decided to look on the map. So my previous video, a couple of days ago, I think it's the 15th of November today, 14th, 15th of November, I did one a couple of days ago when I was stood down by Dover Castle, and I talked about some brothers, or brothers that were killed in the First World War. And I want to go back to the First World War, and a subject that when I used to do the tours out to France, I always made mention of these. So in 1911, the population of Britain, England, Scotland, Wales and Ireland, was 45 million. And 25% of all adult males joined the Army, Navy or Air Force, or the RFC, Royal Flying Corps, and then the RAF, to fight for Britain. 25% of all adult males. Now, the figures are disputed, because nobody can really clarify actually how many there was. But they estimate almost 250,000 boys enlisted and served during World War One. And these were males under the age of 18, so classified as boys for the under the age of 18, as you had to be 18 to serve on the front line. In fact, at the beginning of the war, you had to be between the ages of 18 and 41. And then later in the year, in fact, it wasn't until 1918 they raised the maximum age to 51. But in the first part of the war, over 2.5 million men enlisted, among them boys. And in the first year alone, 1.1 million men joined up. Now, it was vital that we got men into the army, as the Germans at the outbreak of the war had 3 million men, and in Britain only had 700,000. So it's a massive difference. And it's probably during that time a lot of these young boys were able to sign up and get through the enlistment process. I think rudimentary questions would have been asked, and they probably wouldn't have pressed home any searching investigations, if you like, into the actual age of these boys. I want to talk about a couple of these boys. So, George Mayer and a Sidney Ellis. Now, they both joined up at the beginning of the war. Sidney was 12 when he signed up. Now, he was over 5'3" at 12 years old. So you could be, I don't know, you could give the recruiters a little bit of room there, because they're trying to get as many men enlisted as possible and, you know, get them through the door, get them in uniform. But this Sidney Ellis was 12 and George Mayer was 13. But I have some records of him being the youngest soldier serving, but as I've just said, Sidney Ellis was 12. So both of these boys had different wars. George Meyer was in the King's Own Royal Lancaster Regiment, and on his first experience of shelling, broke down. He's 13 years old. I'm sure many men broke down as well, so it's not surprising. But he was taken away, he was put in front of an officer. Once questioned, his age came to light. And they didn't just sort of withdraw him from the front line and, make sure he's fed properly and sent him home. No, they locked him in a cattle truck with some other young boys that they'd found out, during the course. Locked him in a cattle truck. Sidney Ellis, on the other hand, he joined at 12, and at 13, he went over the top at the Battle of the Somme and fought for 6 weeks at Delville Wood. Now, any of you know about the Battle of Delville Wood would know that that was some of the most heaviest casualties during the war. It was an awful place to fight, even for a man. But for a young boy of 13, to have experienced that and to, carried on. Now, eventually, his mother, one of his comrades, when he went home, told his mother where he was, Sydney. She wrote to the War Office, produced his birth certificate, and he was removed. But he'd been there for quite a while on the Western Front. And George Meyer went home, lived his life. Sidney Ellis, he went home, and as soon as he was 18, he signed up, enlisted. The war was over by now. He was out in Austria. What they were doing out there, I don't know. Some peacekeeping duties, I should imagine. When he left the army, he joined the police force, and in World War II, he served as a bomb disposal officer, or as EOD as we know it now, explosive ordnance disposal. So two startlingly different service lives for these two boys. And I think you'd be forgiven for thinking that they just came from different backgrounds, they were of different stock. Both came from the back streets, really. Both had very similar upbringings. But I think it's just either who you're around or just your mentality. That's my own personal view anyway. Make sure I don't compare today's standards to the standards then, because they were completely different. A lot of people thought, certainly at the beginning of the war, let's go off, sign up for king and country. Obviously, by the end of 1915 and certainly after the 1st of July 1916, things were different. The draft actually wasn't introduced until the 2nd of March 1916, and that was only for single men. And in May of that year, 1916, they then made it for married men as well to be drafted. Now that's just a snippet of a few boys that signed up, and the last one I'm going to talk about, like I say, about the standards of the day. Sorry. It's not cold, but it is miserable today. I think I put the wrong teeth in. But the last boy I'm going to talk about is a young man by the name of Horace Isles. He was 14 when he was on a bus going somewhere, I think into Leeds, where he came from, and a stranger, female woman, gave him a white feather. So she shamed this young boy into signing up, basically, at the age of 14. Again, different standards. I mean, can you imagine that these days? You'd have a group of 14-year-olds around you with cameras telling you where to put the white feather. So anyway, Horace joined the Leeds Pals, who officially were the 1st Battalion Prince of Wales Own. And again, anybody that knows about the Leeds Pals, they went over the top on the 1st of July 1916, the Battle of the Somme. And I think by noon or just after noon, they'd lost 15 officers and 504 men, and amongst them was Horace Isles. Just beggars belief. But he was shamed into joining the army. So again, you know, I don't want to compare our standards today with the standards then. But I will say this, so they did have recruiters who would just, you know, just to get the numbers through basically at the beginning of the war. And that's probably how a lot of these young boys got through. I'm going to put a picture up of Sidney Lewis, and he's 13 in this picture. And he was over 5'3", which was the minimum height. You'd be forgiven for thinking at a glance he wasn't a little bit older. So, but it's also true that recruiters were paid 2 shillings and sixpence, or 2 and 6. And for those of you that are old enough to remember the old money, that's roughly the equivalent of £6 nowadays, or maybe £8 these days actually. So, you know, you make your own judgments, don't you? And I have no judgment there actually. I don't really know what to think about that. I'm going to just stop and just spin you around a second, just so you can see a bit of the wildlife. No, he's gone. Must have been one of those Navy SEALs. He's out there fishing. Anyway, so I think I said Horace was the last person. He's not actually. I want to mention someone else. So I've done quite a few battlefield tours. Do a lot of them to Belgium around the Ypres salient. Some down to France, to the Somme, Normandy. But when I go to Ypres in Belgium, one of my first stops usually is Essex Farm. Now, Essex Farm is a cemetery. It's about 1,150 burials there. And it was a field hospital quite close to the front. It's right on the canal, the Yser Canal there. In fact, it's where Lieutenant Colonel John McCrae, who is reputed to have written the poem In Flanders Fields. And there is some infrastructure there. There was an advanced dressing station there, and if any of you have been there, you'll know that area well. But in that cemetery is Valentine Joseph Strudwick, who served with the Rifles, and he was 15 when he was killed on the Ypres salient, and he's actually buried there at Essex Farm. So if you're ever out that way, look that one up. But it's one of the most visited cemeteries on the Western Front, certainly in that area around Ypres, because of Valentine Strudwick's grave. Now, just before I go, the Commonwealth War Graves Commission, or the Imperial War Graves Commission as it was, they listed the soldiers as their age given. So that is where we find it difficult to actually find out how many young boys were killed on the Western Front. There are lots of different estimates, 30,000, 40,000, 50,000. And like I say, I don't like to give my opinion, but in my opinion, one is too many of boys to be killed. Certainly, on the front line, to be put in that position. But again, I shouldn't mix our standards today, because they are very different. So, I hope you like this video. And like I say, you know, they're the ramblings of an old man. You know, something for my kids to watch in the future. But if you are enjoying them, please like and subscribe. I love the comments. I really do. I can't get round to all of you. I do have young layabouts at home that I have to look after and feed. Although my wife would challenge that, because she would say that I'm one of those layabouts as well. Anyway, so if you are, please like and subscribe, and I'll see you next time. Thank you.